Hey everybody, this is Adam from Tungsten Amplification. I am in the middle of rewiring an added preamp gain stage on my Magnavox 9304 hi-fi stereo amplifier. When I first modded this circuit, I added the Universal 4S preamp, which is a circuit that I found online. It's a DIY thing. It sounded good, but as I did more research a couple years later, I learned that the placement of the volume control was not optimal. So what I'm doing now is I'm getting ready to rewire the volume control so that it is between the input and the first stage, as opposed to between the first stage and the phase inverter. So follow along. I had started shooting another video prior to this, and I screwed up. So I'm gonna fix what I done, and then I'm going to make it better. So we're going to start by pulling this here resistor out. It's a 10K. Come on now. There we go. And we got another 10K down in here. We're going to undo that. And we're going to undo that. These 10Ks were right at the input because on the previous circuit these went right straight to the grid. But on the new version of the circuit, we're going to run a wire from the input to the input of the pot, and then the output of the pot will go to the grid, and we'll put a resistor on that side. And then everything else on this socket will stay intact. We've got 100K plate resistors, and then we've got 25 microfarad bypass caps over 1.5K resistors. Might be a little bit on the hot side. I built this, probably 10 years ago. And I basically just copied a Tweed Fender preamp gain stage, so it may be a little bit hot. I'm not going to mess with voicing it today. I just want to move that volume control in relation to where the gain stage itself is at. So let's go ahead and get these resistors on. And we're just going to use these same, I don't know, that 10K resistor looks really toasted. We're not going to use that. Let's see if I can get a close-up of that for you. Yeah. Resistors are cheap. Let's use a new one. Or at least one that doesn't look like that. Let's clean up the end on here. So on the previous video I was starting to talk about how I learned electronics, and long story short, it was by visiting technicians, paying them to work on my stuff, watching over their shoulder politely, and asking them questions if I didn't understand. And there was a lot I did not understand back in the day. I started learning electronics in the early 90s. I bought my first tube amp. It was a 65 Fender Champ, Vibro Champ. I bought my first one in 1991, I think. Sounds about right, maybe 1990. Paid $75 for it. It worked pretty good, but it fascinated me. And then one day I bought a 6v6 from a music store because I wanted to see if it would sound better, and I stuck it in there, and tube was bad. It shorted, blew out the cathode resistor. I saw smoke come out of the inputs, and after that I made a friendship with the local tech and started learning. I watched him do a cap job on an amplifier, and after that I felt that I was confident enough to do a cap job on my own amplifiers. So I did. And it just kind of took off from there. Mid-60s Fenders were, I won't say dirt cheap in the mid-90s, but they were inexpensive. You know, it was not uncommon for me to pick up a 65 Bassman for $200, $250 maybe. Anything over $350 was expensive in my mind back then. So I had 3 Bassmen at one point, Bandmaster, non-reverb drip edge Princeton, 66 twin reverb. Nobody cared about pedals in the 90s. I got a Ram's Head Big Muff for $60. It's awesome. I played that for probably 15 years. Alright, so we gotta make a solder joint here. Let me push this back. I'm just attaching wire to these 10K resistors because they are too far away from the pot to make a straight connection. When the amps got too expensive for me, which was about the $400 mark, I stopped buying them. And one day I was perusing the Sacramento Bee, which was the local newspaper, the classified ads, and I saw a Hammond organ for sale. So I went and looked at it and immediately bought it. It was a Hammond BV with a Leslie 31H speaker. Paid the grand total of $500 for it. And that kind of set me down a different road because while I may not have been able to afford the Fender amps anymore, I could buy a Hammond and a Leslie sometimes for no more than $500 or $600, fix them up, and sell them for usually 2 to 3 times that much. And that is when my business, Hammond Resurrection, was born, somewhere around 98. And through that business, I met Bob Schleicher of Hammond organ, legendary Hammond organ technician. He had stories. He was not a braggart, like he wasn't a name dropper or anything. He didn't even like rock and roll all that much. But he had worked for and with pretty much everybody who was anybody. Super nice guy. So I started, when I was buying the Hammonds, I would fix what I could. And anything I couldn't fix, I would drive down to Oakland. And Bob would fix for me. And I would ask him questions, and he was kind enough to listen to them and answer them all. There were many. Let's cut that into 2 pieces so I can do both of these. And one day, while I was at Bob's, I told him, I said, I'm not sure that I even really know how to make a proper solder joint. That man stopped what he was doing, waved me over to his bench, come on, and very slowly and masterfully showed me how to tin a tip of the iron, how to heat a component properly from the underside. He flowed some solder and kind of moved it around with the tip and showed me how the solder will follow the heat. It was very informative. And he didn't have to do that, but that's the kind of guy Bob was. He was very willing to share his knowledge. That's probably why I started sitting here and doing this, because You know, in reality, it's just a Saturday morning. I'm hanging out in my shop by myself. Ever since I found out that the volume placement on this circuit was not ideal, I wanted to do this job, and I figured, well, what the hell? Somebody else can come along with me, and anybody that's built the Universal 4S Preamp, you know, it's a good sounding circuit, but it's not without its design flaw. So this is going to fix that flaw. I built an external Universal 4S preamp with RCA jacks in and out, a stereo unit, so that I could plug a CD player into it and run that into like an old Pioneer receiver and just juice up the signal with one tube stage. And I've already done this conversion of moving the volume pot, so I know it works, I know it sounds good. It's just a matter of getting this stereo up to spec. Alright. So we're looking like that right there. Come on. I bought these side cutters on Amazon, Dowell brand. They look like the Exolites, but they're not quite as precision. I do not recommend. I'm going to use them until they fall apart, because, you know, $8 is $8, but next time I'm going to buy another set of Exolites. I really just wanted something that didn't have the same color handle as my pliers, because I can't tell you how many times I picked up my pliers when I wanted my wire cutters, or I picked up my wire cutters when I wanted my pliers. They used to make the flush cutters with orange handles, but I think they stopped that a couple of years ago for some unknown reason. It probably saves them 2 pennies per unit. We all know what that means. It's going to save them 2 pennies per unit. Alright, so what I'm doing now, I'm wiring the output side of one channel. So the signal is going to come into this pot, it's going to be attenuated or not, and then it's going to come through this wire, through this resistor, to the grid of the input tube. You can't see what I'm doing, it's hidden under that orange drop, but I'm soldering the 10K resistor to the input grid. And then I'm going to clip off the excess lead. Try not to shoot any wire clippings into the pots. That will cause strange issues. That will take you hours, if not months, to track down and figure out. At least it did with me the first time I did it. It's even worse when you're trying to demo the amp for someone who you admire musically and it's not operating properly. But that's a story for another time. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to wire from this input terminal to the input of the pot. But I've got to get the baby booger collector first and get the solder out of there. I was going to call it snot because that's how I roll. That's good enough. Almost. Sometimes it's easier just to grab the solder and use the surface tension to pull it away. And sometimes not. I'll just deal with it. I do own one of the automatic solder suckers, but I find these things end up more clogged and unusable than they are helpful, so I don't even use it anymore. Okay, so we're going in at a very low approach angle, so what I'm going to do is pre-tin the wire so it will be sticky to the solder. And I'm going to have to bend it up just a hair so that we can just kind of roll it right in there. Perfect. I'm just trying to melt some of the other solder there. I'm going to flow some anyhow. I just didn't want a big blob. Alright, there we go. Very carefully clipping the wire there is to not eject it into the pot mechanism for the aforementioned reasons. It'd be very embarrassing to advise you guys not to do that and then turn right around and do it myself. Would not be the first time. This is the most rickety damn chassis. It's that can cap. Alright. So we will push back the pushback insulation. We'll apply a little solder to the tip there. I'm going to switch hands. I hope this is all in frame. I don't know if you can see any of it. I am not a videographer. I am a man. Oh, that didn't work. And this is rickety. I gotta bend that now. Come on. There's old pieces of wire lead stuck to there. There we go. Now we're finding it. Get some mechanical connection there, clean the tip, and then actually solder that in there. Right now it's just held in place. I don't consider that worthwhile. There we go. Fresh. The fresh mecha. Okay. If you just got a view of my bald spot, I apologize. I am really just trying to make the amp work, primarily and be a YouTube superstar secondarily. I'm just about to pull out my cable here. Yeah. I'll have one of those platinum plaques on my wall anytime now. So I got two options. I can go around this way, which takes me under the cathode resistor, or I can come around this way, which is pretty short. Yeah, I don't think it's long enough. It might be. That just takes me past the filament. I think I'm going this way. And I could not get that terminal clean, so this is going to be like playing Operation circa 1977. Sorry, I try to do all this stuff on camera. I'm tinning the tip of this resistor, so when I stick it in that already soldered tube socket, it will hopefully meld right in like Spock when he grabs your neck. Okay, there we go. There we go. Alright, we're in there. Hold it still while it cools. Oh, it moved. Heat it up. Find the spot. There we go. Hold it still. Alright, there we go. I don't know if I can clip that end off. This is as real as it gets. That's why we earn the big bucks. The tube amplifier builders and repairmen. I've got 5 people in my yard right now just polishing my Rolls Royce. It's awesome. Okay, so we have the reach. And we're crossing the filament at a 90 degree, which was not intentional, but I will take it. I will even take credit for it, totally by design, for low noise. Again, I hope that what I'm doing is in frame. Really sorry for my video skills. I am definitely not the guitologist or Uncle Doug or any of those guys that are professional YouTubers. I'm what they would call a non-professional YouTuber. Sometimes I forget to make a video for 2 months. It doesn't even occur to me. Then some days like today, I figure I'm working on something that's a little out of the ordinary, and you guys might be interested in viewing. Alright, so the only other thing we have to do is go from this input to this tab on the pot. Find another piece of blue scrap wire. Here we go. Just getting a bit of a mechanical connection there before I apply the heat. And holding it still. That's a lot of solder on there. When I'm working on prototype amps or amps that I know are never going to leave my shop, it's usually more about just getting it done. I don't really need them to be perfect. Electronically, yes, but cosmetically, you might see some hinky shit if you ever buy one of my original prototypes. Sometimes I'm just winging it and trying stuff. Usually when I'm having the most fun. Alright. I'm going to do some more right-handed soldering. I'm not fully ambidextrous, but I play one on TV. And I slipped in a Holiday Inn back in 1992 outside the Oakland Coliseum when the Grateful Dead were playing there. So that should give me some right-handed soldering cred. Alright, so now we have our inputs coming into the pot, going out through a 10K grid resistor into the grid. That's going to come out through the plate. These orange drops are hooked up to the plates. One of them is going to go here. One of them is going to go here via that wire. We'll have to make a little heat shrink connection like Chuck Woolery back in the day. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to want to pull that wire out. These Magnavoxes can be a little bit crowded on their tube socket terminals. So bear with me if I start to curse. No problem. It's always nice. So let's think about this. This is the left channel. Sorry. Just Bang my noggin right into the camera. Left channel. It's a coming to the bottom. Right channel coming to the top. So left channel, we want to go there. And this is our plate. So this is the cap that we want to insert. Oh yeah, right here. Yep. This is the place you come for 1990s inappropriate dad jokes and tube amp repair. I'm not a father to a human child, but I certainly was born with the gene to make bad jokes. You cannot stop me. I cannot stop. I won't stop. Alright, so that capacitor leg is secured in the tube socket. And we will apply some heat and solder. The Magnavox 9400 series has a floating paraphase inverter. I really think that's part of the reason that they sound so great. The older I get and the more amps I built and the more I play around with circuit design, I've started to really hear the limitations of a cathodiene phase inverter. And the paraphase inverter, even though on paper it is more primitive than the cathodiene, man, it's got a feel to it and a breathiness that I really kind of like. Oh yeah, we can bypass all of that plate voltage right there if we go this way. Cool. That's what I'm doing. If I was building this amp from scratch, this wire and this capacitor would meet each other at a terminal. They would be solidly attached to, but again, this amplifier is never going to leave my shop. So it is going to get the easy treatment. Now, I'm not going to drill a hole and put in a terminal, and I can't stretch that cap from there all the way over to here. So they're going to meet in the middle with a little bit of heat shrink. Make a couple little hooks there. And clamp them down onto each other. Pull that insulation back. There we go. There we go. Alright. That should do it. Just double check everything. And again, I'm not, trying to crap on the Universal 4S preamp. I appreciate that there's people out there that put projects like that online. It inspired me to want to do something. And I bought parts and I did it. Everything can be improved on. My amps could be improved on. We're all here to learn, and that's kind of what the journey's about, is just to get out there and do something. Did this chassis need a preamp attached to it? I don't know. I plugged sources directly into it, like a Bluetooth from my phone, and it had volume, but it didn't have a ton of punch. And adding that extra tube stage to it did add punch, but the volume control placement also affected the EQ, and it wasn't ideal. When I built the Dynaco ST35, I thought about putting the preamp stage in there, but when I built it stock, there was enough gain in the one stage that I didn't need to. These guys here had a preamp, you know, up in the radio portion of the console, because this came out of the old wooden furniture console stereo that could not be saved. I bought a bunch of those, and I still have 2 of them in my shop. I've sold a couple of them, but every once in a while you get one, especially down here in Florida, where the cabinet is just, it's beyond saving. So I will pull the amplifier, sometimes I'll pull the speakers, and, you know, repurpose them as best I can. This one just happens to be my shop stereo. But anyways, I think I probably said all I can about this. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Let me just walk you through the circuit. I started to do that on the first video, but then I made a mistake and I just said screw it, I'll start over. You guys won't know the difference unless I tell you, which I just did. So anyways, when I recapped this amplifier, I didn't have a filter cap, a can cap that would fit, so we got a 40, 30, 10. Those are the stock values. I used a 250 for the power tube cathode bypass cap. I think it originally had a 25, maybe a 50, but probably a 25. I put a 250 in there just to add a little bit of extra low-end handling. On these Magnavox amps, whenever you buy them, your coupling capacitors are going to be shot. So I've got Mojo Dijons for the 047s, and I've got Mallory 150s for the 022s. Not for any specific reason other than that's what I stuck in there. I like the 047s. When I built the Dynaco ST35, when I made my own stereo, I used the Dijons in that amp. They're smooth, they're nice. The paper and oils did have a little bit more high-end detail. Like I could hear a difference between the two, but I don't feel that the Dijons are lacking in any way. And then the way the circuit's laid out, we've got the input now, goes straight to the volume pot, that goes to the grid of the input tube, comes out the plate through these giant orange drops, and goes straight to the phase inverter on each side. Alright, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. I've got some other small projects like this, and I plan to make short videos. Well, no surprise. See ya.